There's something to it. I mean, this isn't just something people are hallucinating or making up. There are sightings that just cannot be explained.
In the summer of 1972, the small town of Louisiana, Missouri was struck with terror as rumors of a large monster started making their rounds.
The first and most dramatic sighting that occurred that year that made it in the newspapers was on the Harrison property. One afternoon, the two boys, the Harrison boys, were playing out back, and they looked up and saw this thing standing there that had come out of the woods, holding what they thought was either a juvenile or a baby or even a dead dog.
You might chalk it up as kids' imagination run wild, but the boys weren't the only ones to see the creature. Their sister Doris also saw it, and soon after that, more reports started coming in.
At the time, several of the locals saw it there in this area called Marzoff Hill, and began reporting the sightings, and that was picked up by the local newspapers, and also some of the television stations began to broadcast the news of the creature, and they came up with the name Momo.
Momo, or the Missouri Monster, was described as standing upright between 6 and 7 feet. The creature was also covered in hair, including on its face, and sometimes was described as having red glowing eyes. It also had a unique footprint.
During that time period, several strange tracks were found near the areas where the creature was sighted, and it appeared that it had, kind of what you would think of as a Bigfoot track, but it only had 3 toes.
Author Lyle Blackburn has been featured in dozens of television shows and has written several books on cryptozoology. For him, the case of Momo stood out enough for him to pursue the story.
The Momo story attracted me because I do love these stories where a small town is sort of assailed by some creature. Momo is one that I had read about when I was a kid, and it's kind of mentioned in Bigfoot books, like, just brief, synopsis. But with all that newspaper coverage and all that other stuff, I knew that it was one of those ones that had more to the story than people had invested enough time in.
In his book, Momo, The Strange Case of the Missouri Monster, Blackburn takes readers on a journey to the quaint Missouri town and talks to eyewitnesses about what they saw. But he won't try to convince you that Momo is real.
Whether you believe in Bigfoot or Momo or not, it doesn't matter. You read this book and you're going to say, wow, I just can't believe that happened. That's just a crazy little niche of bizarre culture.
He's aware skeptics are out there, and is understanding of why.
So if you spend all your life studying, getting to be a respected scientist in your field, anthropology or whatever, you're going to be reluctant to risk that by coming out and speaking much about Bigfoot and things, because your colleagues may find that silly or not very serious, and it's a risk.
But he does have some good answers for those who question whether or not a Bigfoot-like creature actually exists.
In truth, there can be a very, very small population that can still be viable. If you just consider how rare these things are, and if they have the wherewithal to stay secluded, or, even if they, bury their dead or conceal their dead or something like that, it just becomes less probable that we're going to find a dead one. And that's not to say a hunter hasn't walked right past some bones and thought it was a bear or a cow or something else and didn't even realize.
While he believes the Momo story holds credibility where others do not.
Throughout the years, there's been some credible reports, and some of those being in that area where this Louisiana town is located, which is in the far east, right near the Mississippi River. At the end of the day, people did, Doris Harrison didn't just make this story up and call her parents and report it. Those kids saw something.
Blackburn says you don't have to be a believer to appreciate the story.
In the story of Momo, whether the creature existed or not, is still a wild and crazy, amazing story. I mean, it was like something out of a horror movie. You could not make this up. And so for that reason, and for the fact that it basically becomes history and modern folklore, the story is great unto itself, whether we prove it or don't.